Update. My wife made a tape with a C-list actor. I took her to court and drained her dry. Original post. Hey guys. So, I'm dealing with a really tough situation with my wife, and I'm at a loss about how to move forward. I decided to come here and seek advice because the regulars here have tackled countless stories that are somewhat similar to mine. My wife and I are both 36 years old, and we've been married for exactly 8 years now. The situation is even more frustrating because our anniversary was just 2 weeks ago. To give you some context, we don't have children, and we've always been huge fans of TV and movies. It might sound boring, but she doesn't really have any major hobbies beyond that. I used to game, but I lost interest as I grew older. Now, here's where things get complicated. There's a TV show that I kind of like, but my wife absolutely loves. I don't want to name it specifically, but it's heading into its 4th season and has gained a lot of popularity. There's an actor in the show who has always caught my wife's attention, and it's been a real annoyance. I've dealt with women obsessing over attractive celebrities before, and it can be really draining. It's like they'll gush over someone in the room, but if you do the same about some supermodel, they won't talk to you for a week. Double standards, right? The actor, let's call him Nolan, isn't a major celebrity. If you watch the show, you'd recognize his face, but he's not well known outside of it. He's not an A-list actor like Willem Dafoe or DiCaprio. In fact, he's more of a C-lister, with his only significant role being in this TV show. It's not out of spite, it's just an observation based on his career and filmography. A while back, my wife made a comment that struck me as disrespectful. While watching the show, she went on and on about how handsome Nolan is, how hot his body is, and how sexy his voice is. Then she casually mentioned, "I want him to be my hall pass." I was completely taken aback. I didn't even know what a hall pass was because I'd only heard it in a high school context. For those who aren't familiar, a hall pass is a slang term for the one person someone in a committed relationship can sleep with, without it being considered cheating. When she said that, I scoffed and told her it was ridiculous to even suggest such a thing. It led to a heated argument that night, but I eventually realised that it was unlikely she'd ever have the chance to be with Nolan. What bothered me most was the blatant disrespect of admitting sexual desire for someone outside our marriage. I wanted to come up with a mega hottie to claim as my own hall pass, just to make a point, but it felt childish. Instead, I tried to be mature and have a serious conversation with her about how hurt I felt by her comment and her general obsession with Nolan. She apologised, though it didn't seem like she truly understood why I was upset, and we left it at that. Over the next 6 to 7 months, she slipped up multiple times, making comments about how gorgeous Nolan was whenever she saw him on the show or on social media. At first, I confronted her, but I soon gave up because I was tired of the uncomfortable conversations. It made me question why it was so hard for her to avoid things that disrespected me. I've made mistakes before, but I've always tried to correct them. Nolan had become a sore spot for me, and I started getting annoyed every time I saw his face on the show. But I thought it was just a face on a screen, so it shouldn't be a big deal, right? Wrong. A convention was announced in a city nearby, and my wife found out through Nolan's Instagram page that he'd be there for a meet and greet. She didn't consult me about going. She just informed me and spent the next 2 weeks gushing about it. I was frustrated and told her that I didn't think it was a good idea for her to go if she was going to be so obsessed. She gave me a terrible look, but I insisted she reconsider. She left the room, and I hoped she got the message. But on the day of the meet and greet, I saw her preparing to leave with her suitcase. I asked where she was going, and she said she was heading to the city for the event with Susie, a friend who had been unfaithful to her husband in the past. They planned to stay overnight at a hotel and return the next morning. I was furious and felt like the situation was deeply upsetting, but I decided to let her go and deal with it later. In hindsight, I should have tried harder to stop her, but it was too late. I spent the next day anxiously checking Instagram for any updates about the convention and Nolan, hoping to catch a glimpse of my wife. Out of 34 stories posted, I finally saw her in one, which reassured me she was there safely. However, she ignored my 7 calls, which made me worry even more. When she returned the next morning, I wanted to talk, but she seemed to be on edge. She came upstairs and found me waiting. I asked her how the meet and greet was and if she had met Nolan. She responded with a forced smile, saying the event was nice and that she had met Nolan and others from the show. I asked to see some pictures and she showed me one of her with Nolan and a video of them talking and laughing together. I asked her to send me the picture and the video for a closer look. She agreed and left, and I immediately began to investigate further. I called the bar they supposedly went to, but the manager told me they had no cameras, so I couldn't verify anything. Instead, I focused on the video of Nolan and my wife. I used a facial expression and body language analysis program, and the results confirmed my suspicions of flirtation and attraction from both sides. It was disheartening to see that my wife's obsession with Nolan might have led to something more than just admiration. The next day, I confronted her with the analysis. She was shocked and cried, eventually admitting that she had developed feelings for Nolan. She claimed nothing physical happened, but the emotional betrayal was enough for me. I told her we needed to take a break and figure out our next steps. She agreed, and we decided to attend couples therapy to see if our marriage could be salvaged. It's been a few weeks and things are still tense between us. I'm uncertain if we can overcome this, but I'm trying to stay hopeful. Any advice or support from you guys would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening. Update 1. Hey everyone, it's been a few weeks since my last post, but I've got quite a few updates for you on how things have been going down. I read through pretty much every comment on my original post, and I have to say thank you to everyone for really helping me out. My mind felt like it was in a bog, but I was able to find some clarity. So, I'll let you know how things went down. The first thing I did was call up a divorce lawyer. I had a close friend who went through a messy divorce, but managed to get a pretty good hand dealt to him in the end. So he referred me to his lawyer from back then. We started to get to work. The next thing I did was to call up Susie, my wife's very close friend. I asked her to let us meet up, and she agreed to that. So we met at a bar. Now, Susie is loose. Let me put it like that. Part of me was tempted to get with her, to destroy my wife's friendship with her. But it wasn't the time, if it ever would be. But the whole point of meeting up with her was that if anyone knows about anything about what had gone down between my wife and Nolan, the C-list actor she slept with, it would be Susie. Susie is a drinker, so as long as there were shots being paid for by someone else, it's easy to get her mouth running. We had some drinks and shots, she had a lot more than me, and we engaged in a bit of small talk before we got to the point where she was wasted. I told her I was planning to surprise my wife with a designer bag, and I asked her what she would recommend. She yapped on and on about Chanel and Hermes, and I remember none of the details because that was just meant to be what she would remember. Now, once I noticed that she was really under the influence, I struck. So Susie, my wife, told me everything. I know that she slept with Nolan, that actor. Through her haze, her eyes widened for a second before she went back to normal. How did that happen? I'm just curious. She refused to tell me. She took another drink, swaying in her seat, before letting me know how my wife had been excessively flirty with Nolan and had passed him a paper with her number on it. My wife is attractive, and as much as I hate her right now, I can admit that. Apparently, she had waited until much later, and Nolan had actually sent her a text. That was simply a hotel and a room number. Most famous actors probably wouldn't have done something so stupid, but he's not a huge player in Hollywood. So what about the tape? Did he know she made that? That was a suspicion of mine. Nolan might not have known my wife took a video, and if he didn't, that had a lot of potential, a lot. Again, Susie seemed a little shocked that I knew so much, probably surprised that my wife actually came clean. But yep, she confirmed to me that my wife had taken it secretly. She also let me know that she had watched it along with some of her other girls, and that was infuriating. My wife was basically becoming a porn star for her friends. But I knew I was going to take out the trash very soon. I got all the info I needed from Susie, with the entire conversation recorded, and I ordered her a ride to take her home. Hopefully, Susie wouldn't remember all of this in the morning. I was trying my best not to tip my soon-to-be ex-wife off early. As time went on, the lawyer said things were a go. So, one night, a few days later, when we were watching Nolan's stupid show, I told my wife that I wanted to get a divorce. She actually choked on the soda she was drinking and spluttered for almost a minute. She was fine. She looked at me, nearly hysterical, asking whether I was joking over and over. But I told her that I wasn't. I thought I'd prepared for this part, but it was extremely awkward. I really didn't want to reveal everything I knew yet. In the end, I couldn't take all her questioning and crying, so I left the house. She called me 21 times that night, but I didn't pick up a single call. The next morning, I arranged with the lawyer and had her serve the divorce papers at work. Needless to say, that was embarrassing for her. After I got the confirmation, I went back home because she'd know the reason for the divorce. She came back home within 2 hours of getting served. When I spotted her, it was clear she had been crying for a long time. She came up to me, got on her knees, and started crying all over my knees, trying to say something. But it only came out as a lot of loud mumbling. It was irritating. It went on for like 20 minutes, and every time I would push her away, she'd start wailing even louder. When I reached my limit, I very sternly asked her to go upstairs to pack her things. She kept crying and crying, and at that point, I managed to hear her saying how sorry she was, how it was a mistake, and on and on. When I heard the mistake part, I actually laughed and shoved her off my knee. She looked at me sadly from the carpet, and I stood up and left the room. In a few hours she was packed and out of the house. Apparently, she's gone to go and stay with Susie, who, even if she remembers anything about that night, certainly won't volunteer that she fed me with info. Anyway, what's left for me is for the divorce to be finalised, because I still have one major trick up my sleeve, but I need things to be officially over before then. Hopefully, I won't lose interest in revenge, but we'll see, friends. Update 2. It feels like it's been ages, but it has just been under a year. However, I'm finally back with what should be a final update, and boy, is it good. So, we finalised the divorce, and it's not a process I'd want to go through again. It was a lot of back and forth, a lot of stalemating, and just a lot of stress. But it is finally over. I'm going to have to pay alimony, but thankfully, her infidelity, which she did a poor job of denying and which I was able to make easy work proving, made the payments a lot less heavy. Plus, the payment terms won't be for very long. In the process, I exposed Susie and everything she had to let me in on, which was certainly salt to the wound of my wife. A lot of money was split, but I kept the house after an annoyingly long battle on that, and that was good enough for me. Now, once things were clear, this is where I was able to have fun. I had held on to that video since I snatched it off her phone. I mean, Nolan is a C-list, but he's still famous. And there's nothing Hollywood loves more than gossip. So, who did I hit up first? TMZ. Yup. I let them know what I had for them, and I did a very good job of anonymizing, even though I didn't think they'd snitch on sources. I'm not used to the tabloid lifestyle, so I was trying to be as careful as possible. Once I had proved I had what I claimed I had, I got to talking with a journalist from the tabloid, and even made a bit of change off of it. Not much, but not too little. I must have refreshed TMZ 100 times after that, waiting for when they'd go live with the story. It wasn't the same day, but it eventually showed up on their website the next day. My favourite touch in the article? They edited the name I provided. After all, everyone wanted to know who the mystery woman who got the chance to sleep with Nolan was, and they made it clear that Nolan was unaware of the recording. Using the same throwaway email account I used for the correspondence with TMZ, I sent a link to the article to my ex-wife's email address. At this point, all I could do was wait, especially because I wouldn't directly see what was going on in her life and how she would respond to the article. That's what I thought at least, until she knocked on the door to the house that used to be for both of us 2 days later. She seemed crazy, and she kept saying, "I know it was you, admit it, it was you. Admit it was you." I kept playing dumb, but I was doing it in an intentionally over-the-top way because I wanted her to know it wasn't just karma, some universal force punishing her. Nah, she needed to know it was me, and I could almost see the point where she realised I was playing coy. It's like she snapped right then. and she lunged for my throat, clawing and striking. I fell over with the force with which she jumped at me, but it wasn't hard for me to get her off me. Thankfully, a neighbour had seen the whole thing. All her noise attracted his attention, and the police were there in some minutes after the incident. Yes, I pressed charges, which was very satisfying. Most of her family lives in other states, and she and Susie had fallen out, so I hope it took her some time to get someone to post bail for her. Anyway, the assault charge was just a cherry on the top for me. I didn't plan for that to happen. The real big thing was her going to court for unlawful surveillance. She recorded Nolan without his consent, and even though she wasn't responsible for the leak, it only existed because she made it. I don't know how things have been going for her in the long term, but her life has to be in shambles. However, I'm already back in the dating game and enjoying the single life for now. So, thank you for all the advice you gave me. It was rough, but I'm back on the high ground now.